Saving the day virtually, upskilling the London Library team by creating COVID-safe virtual salvage training. I am Meagen Smith, and I worked at the London Library as Collections Care Conservator from February 2020 to November 2021. I was responsible for developing and delivering specialist book and paper conservation programs and preservation activities for the library and archives. As part of my role, I prepared internal displays, external loans, provided digitization support and training, as well as completed a rolling program of book conservation. I have since left the London Library for a collection care role at Lambeth Palace Library, but you can see my conservation work on my Twitter feed at AmazingMeagen. During this talk, I'm going to cover the context of the London Library for salvage activities and training, objectives and aims of our virtual salvage training, how the training was structured, success factors and improvements, learner feedback, and the longer-term benefits from virtual salvage training. To put the salvage training in context, the London Library is a membership charity located in conjoined historic properties, with collections primarily available on open shelves. With member workstations positioned throughout the open shelving, this presents extra issues around membership management when dealing with emergencies, as they often happen front of house rather than behind the scenes. We needed to be ready for emergencies while closed to members and after reopening to members in July 2020, reopening in December 2020, and reopening again in April 2021. We needed to be ready to do the right thing for staff, members, and collections during changing health precautions. COVID provided a catalyst to review our existing training and make improvements relevant to the circumstances. As the nation went into lockdown in March 2020, many of us shifted gears and reconsidered what our work would or could entail, especially those of us who work in collections care and conservation. One consideration that arose early on at the London Library was how we would maintain salvage response with radically different team considerations, and how to train people who continued to be on-site for continuing successful postal loans program, but may not have salvage training nor salvage experience. Our salvage response and training needed to change from team-specific and hierarchy-determined to circumstance-relevant and availability-determined. COVID precautions drove the transformation of training from on-site and in-person to virtual self-service training modules that intended to give everyone potentially working on-site at the London Library an understanding of the activities and risks involved in emergency salvage response. The aim of the salvage training was to ensure the London Library had a skillful and knowledge salvage response team. The objective of the salvage training was to develop a flexible and circumstance-relevant training module that met on-site and off-site scheduling requirements for London Library staff. I drew upon my consultancy training background, where virtual training had been the norm. I incorporated COVID safety guidance, built interactivity, and put together practical exercises and had emailed discussions with those completing the training. The training module included team definitions and responsibilities, emergency salvage procedures specific to the London Library that related to communication, member management, and salvage activities. It covered logging and packing procedures, drying and stabilization techniques, and health and safety awareness, including then COVID considerations, such as establishing one-way salvage pathways. Do you remember those? And organizing individual kit bags. Whilst the majority of the training module was focused on reading and responding to questions, manual practice was still important for salvage training. Therefore, I included a salvage supplies treasure hunt to locate and document each of the places salvage supplies are stored and what type of supplies are kept where. There are 2 book logging activities that included separating and documenting different types of books, and there was a book packing exercise that included identifying salvage handling requirements like bagging, bandaging, and preparing for freezing, as the London Library has an extensive collection of art books that require particular consideration. I must say the core of the training had already been created by London Library alumni like Judith, Erica, and Rachel, but it was structured for in-person training only. I took that existing content, changed and augmented it, and converted it into virtual delivery. Here is a quick example of the salvage supplies treasure hunt I mentioned earlier, where staff were required to visit each salvage supply cupboard, provide the code word to prove they had visited, and list the supplies available. With the complicated floor plan at the London Library that makes it such a unique and beloved location, it really made a difference to physically visit each cupboard rather than intellectually understand where they are located. The virtual salvage training module had been in place since February 2021. 44 people worked through the module. There are a number of factors that led to the successful rollout of the virtual salvage training, along with aspects that needed improvement. Completing the training was successful in teams whose tasks were tightly managed by a line manager. People new to the library were receptive to learning about another aspect of the library's function and how they could ensure collection care through salvage activities. Making the salvage training part of the onboarding process ensured all new library employees had a similar understanding of an ad hoc and stressful activity. The training is a value add for temporary, contract, and emerging professionals where this type of topic isn't usually covered in an academic setting. Offering the core of the training in a way that people could work to their own learning styles and pace made a more effective use of time when no other salvage training could be safely offered. There were aspects to the training that could and would improve the uptake and completion of virtual training module. Because circumstances meant managers who normally wouldn't be involved in salvage activity or salvage training didn't necessarily understand their on-site team members would be co-opted into salvage activities, there was hesitancy to encourage their teams to complete the training. When the team managers understood the broadening participation in salvage activities, there was more management support for the training. Management briefings and understanding is vital to the success of rolling out this type of training. Similarly, when staff that wouldn't have previously been asked to help with salvage understood they might be called upon or need to manage a salvage incident because they would be first or more senior on site, training completion improved. The reduced numbers of staff on site means the traditional hierarchy of most senior person being responsible for salvage activity wasn't reliably possible. Salvage activity and managing that activity fell to people who were on site and were most knowledgeable, therefore everyone needed a baseline level of knowledge. The final improvement I would like to make is better understanding on how to encourage staff who are extremely busy, whether on site or working from home, to prioritize training for an activity that is important but not perceived as urgent. Salvage isn't urgent and important until it is very urgent and very important. So any recommendations for future rollouts from my collection care colleagues would be gratefully welcomed. My former colleagues at the London Library were positive about this method of training on a topic that was either new to them or for which they needed a refresher. Recommendations included making it part of the staff onboarding process. To conclude, while the original aim of the training module was to ensure the London Library had a skillful and knowledgeable salvage response team, there had been additional benefits from the training. There was a wider awareness of salvage procedures that meant member-facing staff were better able to communicate to members what may have been happening in front of them. There was now a wider pool of people to help with salvage activities when on site. Emerging library professionals had been able to supplement their skill sets. Training was available 24/7 to suit varying schedules. And reading and working at one's own pace suited particular learning styles. Diversifying how they offered vital training is a further step to supporting a more diverse workforce. I would like to thank the conference committee for inviting me to speak to all of you about this important collection care activity and hope to answer any questions you may have.